at the end of the day, I always had belief in myself. And I know maybe everybody says that, but, when I look back on my career, it's like there was never a doubt that I wasn't going to make it to the NHL. And so if I'd ever heard the scouting, to me, I was always just kind of the mindset. I definitely had respect for, everybody that put out their lists and who they thought and the draft picks that were getting drafted. But I always just believed in myself and thought why am I not getting drafted? I never understood it.
That was two-time Norris Trophy winner and three-time Stanley Cup champion Duncan Keith. And you are listening to the Up My Hockey podcast with Jason Podolin. Just watch me now. Welcome to Up My Hockey with Jason Podolin, where we deconstruct the NHL journey, discuss what it takes to make it, and have a few laughs along the way. I'm your host, Jason Podolin, a 31st overall draft pick who played 41 NHL games, but thought he was destined for 1,000. Learn from my story and those of my guests. This is a hockey podcast about reaching your potential. Hey there, welcome back, or welcome to the Up My Hockey podcast with Jason Podolin. I am your host, Jason Podolin, and you're here for episode 149. Almost reached that century and a half mark. And yeah, we're celebrating the 149 episode by bringing on a future Hall of Famer. We had on Scott Niedermayer last week, and we're following in the vein of defensemen. And this guy will hear his name called one day, to be assured. And that is Duncan Keith. Duncan Keith won 2 Norris Trophies for the best defenseman in the NHL, or in other words, the best defenseman in the world. He also won 3 Stanley Cups with the Chicago Blackhawks. He also happened to win a Memorial Cup, and he won some gold medals along the way and lots of other stuff. And it was amazing to have Duncan on the pod. We ran into each other, which we covered at the beginning of the episode, at a Penticton Panthers alumni event that the Penticton V's hosted just this past weekend, and was able to shake his hand and meet him formally for the first time. I knew he was in the region, but honestly didn't even know that he played for the Panthers back in the day. So he was a few years after me, but was able to wear the Panther P and the red and blue, and it was fun to get together for that event. When I was talking to him, I found out a ton of stuff that night that I had no idea. I mean, I knew he played for the Blackhawks. I knew that he was a hell of a defenseman, all-star defenseman, award winner, Stanley Cup winner, et cetera, but I didn't know his history. Like I said, I didn't know he was a Penticton Panther. I didn't know that he went to Michigan State and then came back and played for the Kelowna, not Spartans, oh my God, the Kelowna Rockets. And found out a little bit of his story. He played in the minors. He wasn't drafted in the Bantam draft. He did get drafted second round in the NHL out of Michigan State. So it wasn't like he was completely unknown at all. I mean, it's a very high pick that he took, but undrafted as a Bantam. Crazy to me. And with all the stuff that goes on around now with the Bantam draft here in the West. And how many eyes are on everybody, and here's a Norris Trophy winning defenseman that didn't make the Bantam draft, and so I was like, you know what, Duncan, we got to have you on. We got to talk about your journey. I love hearing what I've heard so far, and let's talk more about it. And yeah, so here we are. When I looked up his draft, and I'm looking at it right now, he went, where did he go? He went 54th overall in the second round. I counted it up. 15 defensemen were chosen before him. None of those 15 won a Norris Trophy, and I don't believe any of them won 3 Stanley Cups. He also happened to be the player from that draft to play the most NHL games out of the entire draft class, 1,256. And that's regular season games, not including playoffs. And we know he had a ton of those. And it's just wild, right? And he started in the minors. That's another thing. So he played 2 full seasons in the minors. And we talk about that on the pod as well. And it wasn't like he was necessarily lighting it up. He did say that, the points that he did get, he valued because he was not on the power play. They didn't have him on the power play. So again, this can't believe the magnitude of this story because these stories just keep coming up and they keep reminding me why I do what I do, which is help players get better. It's so wild to see what can happen. You know, if you were to be in an arena at the time watching Duncan Keith play hockey at the AHL level and have 25 points in, 70 games, I don't think that you would have had him in a Norris Trophy winning situation 4 seasons, 5 seasons later. And yet he was. His Trent Yanni didn't have him on the power play. We talk about this there. He was a gifted player and was not put on the power play for 4 seasons. And that was part of his journey to become one of the best defensemen in the world. So really, really cool stuff. We talk about, some of the things that he did as an undersized player. He said he was 130 pounds when he started junior. Obviously not big, and that was in an era where big really did matter a lot more than it does now. Much more physical era, so he was able to get by. Some advice for smaller players out there. We talk about compete and competitive spirit, belief systems, how to learn, how to process. There's a lot of great stuff in this episode, and it really was just an honor to have Duncan on the show. So, yes, I think this goes right in line with the Up My Hockey theme and philosophy that development is king. It's not all about, natural skill. It's not all about, being, in quotes, the best player right now. It's about what you can become. And for Duncan Keith, he obviously became one heck of a hockey player, had a long, healthy career, and now he's continuing on with hockey by giving back by coaching his boy in the Penticton area there. So awesome stuff. I will not talk your ear off any longer. Let's get into the interview with future Hall of Famer, 3-time Stanley Cup champ, 2-time Norris Trophy winner, Duncan Keith. All right, well, here we are for episode 149, I think, and I'm dealing with an ex-Panther alumni by the name of Duncan Keith. Duncan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Jason. It's good to meet you the other day.
Yeah, it was fun. So maybe we'll just start there. We both showed up for a Penticton Panthers alumni event. Thank you to the Penticton Vs, by the way, for putting that on. And Duncan and I shared the same alma mater when it comes to that from back in the 90s. What do you think of that night? First of all, maybe we'll start there.
I thought it was great. Obviously it was nice to see some old teammates that I hadn't seen in a while and catch up with them, and then obviously meet guys like you that we kind of when we joined the Panthers we had heard about but never got a chance to meet. So it was a cool night, and it was nice of the V's, like you said, to put that on for us and remember the Panther days, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I like seeing our old jerseys ripping around out there. I thought seeing the Panther P there and the red and blue jerseys was pretty cool. And I don't know if I said it to you, but somebody mentioned that, boy, they should have played that game in the old barn. That would have been even better.
Yeah, I think somebody did mention that. That would have been a good idea. I don't know if the players would have liked that, but on that small ice. But yeah, it definitely. I missed that old barn, and it's crazy to think we played junior on that smaller ice surface. And
yeah, do you remember the Civic back in Vernon?
In that barn is special.
Yeah, do you remember the Civic Arena back in Vernon?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
So they did the same thing, and they actually played their game in the Civic. So they I forget who they played, but the now the Vipers played as the Lakers and played in the Civic Arena before they ripped it down. It was the last thing they did before they ripped the old Civic Arena down. And like even for warm-ups, like all the players used wood sticks and stuff. Like it was pretty cool the way they did it. The place was packed. It was pretty fun.
That's nice.
Yeah, it was cool.
Cool.
Yeah, as far as Penticton, so how did I see that you're born in Winnipeg, and I'm not sure if you were raised there or not, but how did you end up being a Penticton Panther?
Yeah, I was born in Winnipeg, and then our family moved to Fort Frances, Ontario. So I grew up there with our family, and when I was about 14, we moved out west. So I hadn't been farther west than Winnipeg at the time. So was kind of an adventure to say the least on getting out here and then settling and putting down roots here in Penticton. But yeah, no, it was a big change in our lives at that time, but it was a cool experience. Got to be able to see the when I was 14 and 15, watch the Panthers and in that Memorial Arena, and for a small town kid out of northwestern Ontario, to be able to watch junior A games and see some of the players and how good they were, that was really inspiring for myself. So it was a good move. Yeah.
So you came to Penticton at around that age, 14. Is that how old you were?
Yeah, I was at the time it was first year bantam, so it was my 14-year-old season, and then I got to watch Panthers players like Craig Murray. He was drafted to went to Michigan, drafted by the Montreal Canadiens, and he was a hometown boy, so I remember him and a few of the guys that I ended up playing with were still there 3 years later. And what I liked about it was there was lots of hometown kids, that were locals, whether they were from Penticton or the Okanagan area, so you could kind of resonate with a little bit and strive to be one of those local kids.
Right. Yeah,
so
cool.
it's changed a bit now.
So you went to Penn High then as well, I guess, right? Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I went there for the 1 year in grade 10. I played as a 15-year-old there in that league, and that was with the Paul Kariya era. So
Did
he
you
was
play with Paul Kariya?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that was really cool. I think that was his last year. So he went to Maine, as you know, there, and then won the Hobie, right? And got drafted because he was a late birthday. He got drafted out of Maine, not from the Panthers. So I was there with him his last year in Penticton. So yeah, I mean, that was super fun, right? To be around Paul. And of course, we knew how good he was. I mean, not really, no one's ever really sure how good they're going to be, right? But he was definitely special. And it was fun to be on the ice with him every day. Did you, for you, like I went to Spokane after that 15-year-old year because I wasn't, the way the rules worked, I just couldn't play as a 15-year-old in the dub. Wanted to go to the dub the next year and did. I never really had my sights set on a U.S. college. Is that the direction you wanted to go right off the bat?
Well, not really. I think partly because of my size, especially at the time when I was 16, I was like 130 pounds and 5'9". So I think it was just the right path for me and the timing more than anything, given my maturity as a player and I guess as a man. It was back then. I think you can get away with it now, but yeah, it was a good decision. I played 2 years with the Panthers, 16 and 17, and then just the thought process was to go to school just to get that extra couple of years or extra year of development and then be able to turn pro. But once I was drafted out of Michigan State after my freshman year, we started to talk more about going to Kelowna, and then halfway through my sophomore year at Michigan State, I left to go play in the WHL as a 19-year-old. So I'd already been drafted at that time and physically matured more. So I guess that was a thought process there.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. So you're not a late birthday, but you did you get drafted like 1 year after your first year of eligibility? Is that what happened?
No, but the rules back then were that you couldn't get drafted if you were going to go to school. So I had to, I wasn't allowed to be drafted as a 17-year-old. And you had to be drafted as an 18-year-old if you were going to go to college. I know that rule's changed now. You can be a 17-year-old and get drafted at a junior A, but that was the rule back then. Yeah, it's kind of some weird rules.
Yeah, because you had a really good year there in Penticton, like the one that got you to Michigan State, at least from a statistical standpoint, right? 82 points in 60 games. I'm looking here, and then got drafted there out of Michigan State. You at a high pick, second rounder, 54th overall. So it wasn't like you were off the radar then and like kind of came on the scene, that you grew a bunch or whatever. But you were obviously being watched, and people were recognizing that you had some potential, some future potential as a pro.
Yeah, I just think it was, yeah, just kind of with that, the rule, the combination of the rule and just, trying to, I guess, delay things a little bit so that, um, yeah, maybe I would go higher in the draft if I was able to be a little bit bigger
Right.
and stronger. And I don't even know. Maybe I wouldn't even have got drafted at 17 if I was in the WHL.
Right. What is there? What? Maybe go back to that. So, I mean, being 130 pounds, as you said, in junior, younger guy, you don't know any different at the time. You're just smaller, right? Haven't grown yet. But like, can you look back now and reflect on maybe some of the challenges or some of the lessons, or maybe even how that was a positive thing for you, being
Yeah.
smaller than everyone?
Yeah, I was always smaller than everybody. It just felt like that my whole life. One of the smaller defensemen on the team, and I was never really worried because I just kind of a late bloomer in that regard, and I don't know if it's genetics, but my dad is decent height, and same with my mom. So I always figured that once I hit puberty, I'll end up getting some size, but. Um, yeah, it definitely allows you to I think it as a smaller player when you're growing up, I find that it helps develop those I guess you'd call them survival instincts in a lot of ways. You got to keep your head up and you got to try to be quicker than the other players and get out of the way because you can't physically outpower somebody for a puck. So you got to be smart and use your brains and your quickness and your skill. So I think that helped me definitely over the course of my career and as I got older and matured physically and got stronger and I was I got some decent size. I was still considered obviously undersized defenseman, but just always had the ability to kind of escape or evade and then use my quickness to my advantage.
Yeah, I think that's an important lesson right there. I think especially speaking to amateur athletes out there that are on the smaller side, because it can be pretty demoralizing, right? Like,
Yeah.
always trying to fight that fight and feel like you can't win that fight. But I think you just have to fight the fight differently.
Yeah. Yeah. I never, this funny thing is that I never really, I think you're right. It can be demoralizing, but I never got demoralized. I never felt like I wasn't taking big hits. Um, I always worked on my skating to make sure that I didn't, get hit and using my quickness and that training off the ice paid off. And I think it's that combination of being a good skater and and working hard in the gym so that even though you're small, you could still get around out there and be evasive. So um, yeah, it's
Yeah.
I think that if you're a younger player, that those are probably two things you want to work on, right? It's a skating game, and if you can skate and move around out there good, then you're gonna feel confident.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just finding, I think, new kind of different solutions to the same problem, right? Like there's more than one way to go get a puck out of a corner. Some guys are going to be bigger and they're going to use body position and maybe a more direct line to take it, or you can be a little more finesse, right? And be a little more evasive, and your angle is going to be a little different. Like I think they just got to be curious, right, about the game and using their skill set instead of just feeling like, oh well, every time I get in a battle, I get pushed off the puck. Well, I mean, you approach it a different way, and that's kind of the fun part about coaching now. I find, and I'm sure you're seeing that now with your boy, right? Like to try and open up some perspectives on the game and invite some of that wisdom that you have from all the years you played.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's kind of one of the things that I've thought about a lot the last couple of years is how do you teach instincts, and being able to anticipate the play. I think that was probably a big thing too. It's like you can be quick and smaller or undersized, but you still need to be able to anticipate that play and what's going to happen, and then if you can see where that play is going to where it's going to lead to, then you can be one step ahead, and that's important, obviously.
Yeah, that's a
How
huge.
do you do that anyways, Jason? How how do you coach or teach instincts? Like some of it to me, I've thought about it and look back. It's like how did I develop instincts? And I don't know if it's just a combination of playing a bunch of different sports or just being able to ride my bike all day in the summer and not be told what to do.
Isn't that a great question? I don't think there is one right answer, but I do think it's fun, like that process that you just said. Like, okay, how did I learn this? Like, that's the question I've asked myself a ton of times now, wearing a coach's hat. Like what I knew or what I was good at, how did I learn it? And if I do know how I learned it, now how can I teach it?
Right.
And it's a totally different modality. But I do think one thing is like I played everything growing up. I'm not sure if you did. Were you an athlete or just a hockey player?
No, I was an athlete. Where I grew up in Ontario, Fort Francis, it didn't have all the like a serious baseball league or too serious of a soccer league, but I played all the sports and I was always on my bike running and doing
Yeah.
everything. So
Yeah. And I think like if you understand baseball, basketball, soccer, like there's different, obviously the different sports all have different rules. There's different strategy, there's different areas to find space. Like I think it all correlates, right, to an overall understanding of, okay, now your game on the ice. So I do think that is helpful. The one way I coach it, to answer your question, is I talk a lot about reads at the older, like at the as they get older, right? More competitive hockey is like, what do they see? Like I can continually ask that. Like when they've made a decision and they come off, I'll ask them what was their read. And a lot of times, like they haven't made a read, right? They will get the puck and then they will react in however they think they should react, instead of knowing what was in front of them before that puck even gets there and then making a decision. And I think that separation for me is huge, right? The players that make a read, whether it's defenseman off the rush, seeing that it's a 2-on-2 with no support, you can play that way differently than a 3-on-2 with a high guy,
right.
right? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So I try and talk about that. I try and talk about concepts and strategies, and try and reinforce that again and again and again. So now we're seeing a whole picture, and then when we see the picture, now we're able to act within that picture. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, yeah, the game is all about reading and reacting, right? And figuring out what situation you're in. So the quicker they can make those reads, the better.
Yeah. And I think going back to our talk about, I mean, smaller players, like, isn't that a huge benefit for those players, right? To know where your support is with that puck as soon as you get it. So it's a one touch of the puck and not three touches of the puck to get it to a spot, right? And get your head up. Like
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
key. Like, and I think that's,
Sometimes I wonder if it's not even necessarily has to do with sports. I guess if you're trying to process information, I watched that. I don't know if you've seen it, that Netflix documentary with Aaron Rodgers. Um, I don't watch a ton of Netflix, but I did watch that one, and I really enjoyed it. I think one of the parts they talked about was his ability to process information quicker, and some of that maybe is just the way his brain worked, and he did a lot of crossword puzzles and a lot of reading, and whether it's not has nothing to do with sports, but you're getting a certain portion of your brain turned on, and I don't know. I'm still
yeah.
learning myself here.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's the fun part, is like you never stop learning, right? Like what are some of the things and what are some of the tricks, and that's really interesting to me. When it comes to Michigan State, so it's super interesting to me, like that you went to the university route and then came back to major junior, which doesn't always happen, and you said it sounded like there was a discussion there with your agent. Like, what was that all about? Why did you choose to leave a great school like Michigan State to come to Kelowna?
Well, I guess first and foremost, just the opportunity to play for the Rockets. Such a great organization with the Bruce and the Hamilton family. It was always first class, and I did have the opportunity to go watch a few games when I was younger, and so there was a bit of a nostalgia there to be able to put on a Rocket uniform. But um, yeah, it was a tough decision. It was hard. You're leaving your team voluntarily. I was close with the guys at Michigan State, and I had a great time at Michigan State. I learned a lot. I had great coaches. I had my first year was Ron Mason. My second year for that second half was Rick Comley. So, and it was more of a just a decision based on where I was at, my age, and the fact that I could sign a contract with Chicago sooner. Um, but yeah, no, once I felt like once I got to Kelowna, I was in the right place. You know, I I don't want to say I didn't like school, you know, but there wasn't a whole lot of schooling going on where I grew up in Fort Francis, where not to say that it's bad schooling there. I'm not putting that out there, but it was just a different vibe. You know, hockey's my life, and it's been my life. I wanted to be a hockey player, and then all of a sudden, you know, when you go to school, you do have to put a lot of time in and into your schooling, and for me that was hard. It was, you know, it was a lot, and so I just preferred that focus to be on hockey. And when you're in the WHL, you're playing 72 games. I think they still play 72 now, don't they?
68.
68. Yeah. Okay. So, you know, and it's just felt like more of a pro schedule, and yeah, it was just, you know, the right timing for me to be able to just be closer to signing with Chicago.
Right. Can you contrast the games for me if you can remember at that time? I know like both leagues have evolved, you know, since you were there, but like how would you compare the style of play from Major Junior to D1?
Well, at the time at Division One college, there was no red line rule, so it was kind of the way the game is now. It was fast paced, and it seemed a little more chaotic, you know. And then when I say chaotic, I don't mean it in a bad way. I just mean it that it was fast paced, and you know, the puck is up from the at the goal line. The next thing you know, it's at the top of the far blue line, and you know, so there's adjustments there. And when I went to the WHL, they still had the red line in place, so you couldn't make two line passes. So it was more of a controlled uh, game in that regard, where it was more kind of methodical, moving slower up the ice. And
Right.
so that was definitely an adjustment. I felt like the players in the WHL were in general a little bit younger. You get 16 and 17-year olds, and obviously 18-year olds and 19, 20-year olds. But sometimes in college, you're getting a guy that's a 21-year-old freshman, and by the time he's a senior, he's 24, 25 years old. So you're playing against grown men at college, and both leagues were great experiences for me, and yeah, I wouldn't change anything.
Yeah, well, especially you won a championship in Kelowna, right? You guys won the Memorial Cup there that year?
Yeah, yeah, we had a good team, so I think that always helps too. We when I got there, we they were in the middle of a winning streak, and we just kind of carried that on. And yeah, so anytime you're part of a winning group, it always makes it feel better. But yeah, I still keep in contact with a lot of those guys that I played junior with in Kelowna, and yeah, it's great memories there for sure.
Well, I opened up your hockey DB on that team, and I had no idea. But for those listening, so this Kelowna Rockets team that won the Memorial Cup had Duncan Keith, you know, two-time Norris winner, Shea Weber, like Hockey Hall of Famer. I don't know if he won a Norris or not, but you know, Hockey Hall of Famer. He was 17 at the time, and also Josh Georges on the back end, who I don't know how many NHL games he played, but I mean, had to be over 500. So you know, pretty good decor there, I'd say. Hey, Keith.
Yeah, and the leading scorer for our decor was Thomas Slovak. He was the second round pick from for the Avalanche, and he didn't make it to the NHL, but he led the whole WHL in points that year. So we had a solid decor. Mike Card was on that team too, and he's a Penticton former Penticton Panther, and he played a few games for Buffalo as well. So yeah, we had a solid decor and some good forwards there too.
That's awesome. Let's take a quick break from my discussion with Duncan to actually ask a question. The question is, does someone out there want to participate in a guided mission as we approach February, March of 2025? I think it's a great time to bring one on. Historically, I have done it in the past. I think it's great to get ready for playoffs. I think it's great to tune things up to get ready for the tryout season, which happens after playoffs. There's lots of value to individuals, but I am like flat out busy right now and wasn't sure if I was going to offer it. But the thing is I have a really hard time saying no to players that want to get better. So if this is something that I should offer, I'd love just to build the cohort now and know that there is interest and not go through the work it takes sometimes to to fill a guided mission. So yeah, looking for anyone who's interested. You can go on the website, reach out in the contact form. You can email me, jason@upmyhockey.com. Say, hey, yes, I am interested. Another way to express interest to me and a way to get me to get in touch with you is to complete the mindset quiz, which is on my website. I believe it's also on my Instagram. The mindset quiz there gives you an idea of what we would be working on within the guided mission, which is the Peak Potential Hockey Project, my signature program for hockey players who want to connect personal development and mindset to their game. So the mindset quiz will connect you to that. I'll ask you questions that pertain to some of the curriculum items and some of the action steps that we'll be working on. And then that comes to me. Obviously, I get to see your results and would let me know that, yes, you can put in the notes that, yes, we are interested in having or joining a guided mission pre-playoffs. So yeah, that's it. We have one going right now. We got 8 players or 9 players in, I think, from all across North America, rolling well in the first week. I love seeing the breakthroughs these players make. So much fun working with them, and we do roll these out throughout the year. I was going to take a break, like I said, until the summer. August is always a very popular time for the program. But if there is people out there that want to do it and want to reach out, then I will make it happen for you. So, all right, let's get back to the conversation with Duncan Keith. I'm going to continue on just with like your own personal development, because what an arc. You mean, to at least it looks like from me. I mean, there's not a ton of guys that win a Norris Trophy, first of all, and probably fewer that I would say that come from the second round or even start in the minors. Like, which I love that. I love that. I love that evolution. So, you go from winning a Memorial Cup in Kelowna to 2 full seasons in the AHL with Norfolk. How did that help you, one, for your development, and two, if it did it help you stay grounded as an NHLer to have that experience as an AHL player?
Yeah, for sure. I think at the end of the day, I always had belief in myself, and I know maybe everybody says that, but when I look back on my career, it's like there was never a doubt that I wasn't going to make it to the NHL. And so if I had ever heard like the scouting, and to me, I was always just kind of the mindset. I definitely had respect for everybody that put out their lists and who they thought and the draft picks that were getting drafted. But um, I always just believed in myself and thought like, why am I not getting drafted? I never understood it, and but you can see how kind of hard it is to project, obviously for younger players, and I think for me it was just a matter of there was a lot of good coaching. I had Trent Yanni. I was fortunate to be drafted by Chicago, and I yeah, really grateful that I went there because I had Trent Yanni, who played about 700 games in the NHL as an NHL defenseman, and he was our head coach, and he took the time with all of us defensemen and all the players really, and I guess he believed in me too, and it wasn't. So I finally had the time where it was like, you don't have to go into the corner and just and hammer a guy and be physical. You can use your quickness and use your quick stick to break up plays, and so that to me was a big I think a big change or a big turning point too in my career, where it was finally somebody that was allowing me to use my strengths as a player to defend. Everybody talks about quickness and speed to create offense, but how about some quickness and speed to defend? And so yeah, definitely Trent, and I think Trent is doing still coaching. I think he's in Detroit now and as an assistant there, and it's just no surprise that wherever he goes, whoever he's with, he helps all those young defensemen. So I'm really fortunate that I had him early on in my career that kind of set a big foundation for the rest of my career.
Right. Yeah, that's wild. So you talked about belief. To me, that falls under my term of like mindset, which is what I try and help players with. And I do think that's an integral part of, high performance, peak potential, right? Like being your best. Where, how did you cultivate that? If you could even answer that question, like where did you feel that belief came from, and why was it so inherent within you?
Well, I don't know. That's a good question. I think for one, as a young kid, I always the desire to be in the NHL was high, and I think it's you can make an argument that everybody says that, or everybody had a high desire to be there. But for me, it wasn't. It almost wasn't like a belief. A belief to me is kind of like you're trying to convince yourself. For me, it was either yeah, to me it was I was just I wasn't in the NHL, and then I wasn't until I was there. It was like something I either knew or I didn't know, and I knew that I would get there eventually. And so it was just a matter of time. And I guess at that point in my life, it's you don't know that you're going to be there, but you just you just stay where you're at right now and focus on just getting better every day. And I knew that I was willing to put in a lot of work, and I think that's one of the things that I'm most proud about my career is that the work ethic that I had and the drive to continue to get better. I think you look at young players nowadays, and everybody wants to be the best at a certain age, and certainly it's good to be up there towards the top, but it's a marathon. And I always had my dad telling me that it's a marathon, not a sprint. And you just continue to work at your game and put in more work than anybody else, and then you just slowly just continue to pass people, and continue to get better and continue to rise higher and higher.
Yeah. So when you say getting better every day and, putting in the work, what did that look like for a younger Duncan Keith?
Well, I do think the game has changed a lot now, where kids are putting in lots of work, but when I was growing up and when you were growing up, I don't think the emphasis was there quite as much. I'm not saying it wasn't there,
Yeah.
but I just I just think the whole industry of whether it's a skills coach, or working on your skills, or a skating coach, or a strength coach, and personal trainers, and those whole industries have kind of taken off. So players are trying to be dialed in earlier and earlier. Where for me, I never really had any of that, other than I had power skating lessons once a week, and it was from a figure skater instructor, and that was kind of my skating coach. And it was on the outdoor rinks, and I just knew that if I could get quicker, basically survival. I was smaller, so I didn't want to get killed out there, and knowing that, hey, some of these guys are pretty big, and they're going to come try to take your head off on the forecheck. So you might want to work on your strength and being quick so you could get back, and um, being scared more than anything.
Right, right, right. How about if we maybe compartmentalize it and take it from the AHL scenario? So, I mean, you come off Memorial Cup, you go to the AHL, you mentioned Trent Yanni, a great, mentor and motivator for you and coach to help you in that pro environment where, you're on the ice every day, you're playing a ton of games, you're traveling on the bus a ton. Do you feel like, how are you differentiating yourself with your professionalism or your approach to your own personal development in that era of your career?
I don't really understand what you mean. What do you mean when you like?
Well, I'm saying, like, okay, so there'd be workouts. I'm just trying to remember, like when I was in St. John's, right? Like some guys would leave right after practice, some guys would stay. Some guys would stay on the ice longer. Some guys would have their own method for trying to get to that next level, for
Right.
trying to be better.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. I mean, I don't know. I think some of the guys that played with me would probably laugh, because I kind of always, I guess, what's the term, beat to your own drum a little bit, and I had my own way of doing things. And, um, yeah, I think, like, I don't want to say that I felt like, the off seasons were important for me. I didn't really, whether it was when I was 15, 14, 15, going back to those days where I was worried that my buddies would be getting better than me back home in Ontario because we had outdoor rinks, and here there was no outdoor rinks. So I became obsessed with plyometrics and shooting pucks and putting in so many hours that I thought, oh, my buddies back home are going to be on the outdoor rink getting better than me. And then it just kind of progressed. And at 17, 16, 17, 18, it's like I didn't really, have much of a life in the off seasons. And it was just kind of focused on getting better, all day really. And just thinking that, I'm going to put more work in than anybody and prove people wrong. And I think some of it had maybe I did have a bit of a chip on my shoulder for being a little bit smaller. And you see other players getting talked about or drafted higher, and I'm sitting there thinking, like, why am I not getting, why, what are these scouts not seeing? And I don't think it was any different than when I went to play in the minors. It was just kind of that same mindset that just carried on. And then, like I said, yeah, I was fortunate to have a great coach and great teammates too. Like, I think I think looking back to it, I feel like I used my teammates to my advantage in the sense where you're learning from them all the time. You're learning and getting better from your teammates, whether it's practice or just how they do things, and always kind of taking in and seeing what they do. And um, some things you take and you keep, and then other things you don't like and you throw it out. But um, yeah, just trying to learn from everybody. And we got a great leadership. I just talking to AJ Baines. He was a old Kamloops Blazer captain, and he was our captain in the minors. And so we had great leadership there. Marty Wilford was another guy. He never played in the NHL, but he could have arguably been, had he been a better skater, could have been, playing for 20 years in the NHL. I never saw him miss a pass in practice. It was honestly little things like that you kind of learn. It's like I learned so much from those guys, and they weren't regular everyday NHL players. So you just continue to learn and take things from your teammates and obviously your coaches.
Did you because I mean I'm looking at I got your DB up right now, and I'm looking at it, and your years in Norfolk, so like 25 points and 26 points, as a 21 and 22-year old, or 20 and 21-year old. Obviously nothing wrong with those stats, but I mean, for somebody looking at that at the time, I probably wouldn't have projected you to be a Norris Trophy winner in 5 seasons after that, right? Like
Yeah.
to look at that. And that's exciting to me. So like, did you see that coming for you? Like, did you think that was a potential? Like, where was that internal belief and with that development arc that you had?
Well, I just knew that it was always there. I think it's easy to look at those stats and say, like you said, 25 points or whatever it was, 21 points, 26 points. It's nothing special. But if you had been following along my career day to day and seeing what I was going through, it was, very different than something like that. It's like I wasn't even on the power play um, the first, I think, 4 or 5 years of my pro career. So part of that was Trent basically trying to rewire me into, because I was jumping into the play, offensive and this and that, but he was trying to get me to think more defense, just focus on defense. Now you're just a defenseman. You're going to be quick defensively, use your speed and quickness to break up plays and then create offense that way. Um, and so that's kind of how the foundation of my game was set. And then even going into the first 2 years in Chicago, it was like there was no power play time. you know what it's like when you get on the power. If you're not on the power play at all, I wasn't even on a second unit. You're just trying to get, you're trying to make plays 5-on-5. It's at the pro level, it's nice to get those cookies and you get those extra touches, and that's where the defensemen that get a lot of points they're on the power play.
Yeah.
So I think I always kind of knew I had that in my game, and it was just kind of resetting everything to focus on the defense, and then being able to balance things out once I did get that opportunity to play on the power play.
What an amazing correlation. Like I think I told you at the game there that I had Scott Niedermayer on, his episode's getting released actually today. One of the things that he talked about playing for Jacques Lemaire was the frustration that he personally had with how Jacques wanted him to play, right? And how he wanted him to be a defensively minded, almost defense first type of player at the beginning of his career. And he kind of felt like he had reins on him, and he said for like a couple of years it was super, super frustrating for him. But then once he got it, like kind of his world changed a little bit, right? I mean, obviously they won cups, because of it. He said just his evolution of a player, and he didn't think he would have been the player he was without that. I mean, that experience that he had, which he hated at the time, right? Like,
Yeah.
how did you feel about it? Did you feel like you were being held back, or did you feel like, hey, I'm learning something that's going to benefit me here down the road?
Yeah, you know what? I knew that, at 20 years old, I wasn't ready to play in the NHL. So when Trent's coming to me and telling me what to do, I'm all ears. He's played 700 games in the league, and, I believed anything he said. And then at 21, there was no NHL. So that was another year for me. That was the year-long lockout. So that year, you knew you were going to be in the minors, and I know I'm not on the power play. It's just, I started to develop some confidence that year, especially knowing playing against guys like Jason Spezza, who was in the NHL the year prior, and other players that were still on their entry level deals, and I feel like I'm shutting these guys down, and maybe I wasn't. I was probably minus a time or two, but you definitely get some confidence from that, and and yeah, just to know that, okay, well, I'm playing against these guys in the NHL that were in the NHL the year prior, and I'm doing well against them, and then you make it to the NHL at 22, 23, and as time went on there, I felt like, okay, I kind of do feel like I'm being held back a little bit, and I'm still not on the power play. And it wasn't until I was about 24 that I got on there on a second unit. And so, yeah, and you just you finally, break through on the power play, and I guess have a little success, and coach keeps putting you out there.
Right. But the defensive side of the game for a defenseman is really ultimately crucial, So it sounds like the longevity of your career, the success within the team success of like you winning these Stanley Cups, and also winning your individual awards. You were a complete player, I guess. Let's be honest, right? Like you weren't a one-trick pony. You could defend. You're a 200-foot defenseman. And so maybe those formative years of Norfolk and Chicago was really one of the things that helped you become that.
Yeah, I really do believe that. I mean, I think that I think probably, if I really look back on my career, even going back to minor hockey, I was probably more defensive minded in the first place. The offense kind of started to come when I came out to BC, and I was watching Pavel Bure lots and on TV, and and wanting to get faster and quicker, and but I think at the heart of my game, it was not getting scored on and being hard to play against and taking guys time and space away, and being defensive first. And if I could go back and do my career over again, which I kind of joke around sometimes, it's, you look at some of these skill coaches, it's, I see the way Makar moves along the blue line, and Quinn Hughes, and the things that they do. It would have been fun to watch those guys, and try to take those things from into your game.
Yeah, it's interesting to watch the evolution of it. Hey, what some of these guys are doing now, And yeah, it's funny. Like my boys will be like, "Oh, the game was so different," and or the players are better. I mean, yes, the players are better, but it's just because there's been an evolution to it, right? Like you could take Mario Lemieux or yourself and like give them the same resources and the same ability to see what's going on, and like you could have been walking the blue line, I'm sure, like Cale Makar does right now. It wasn't really open as an option at that point, you know?
Yeah, I mean, even the open mohawk, like just seeing players do that, like I never did that once in my entire career, opening my hips up like that. I thought it looked dumb, Like I was like, why would you want to do that, But it's like it makes sense, right? When you know how to do it and you've seen how important it is to be able to do that now.
Yeah, yeah, that's funny. Uh, And so, yeah, so your own evolution there. You said you got on the PP. Was that where the breakthrough was, like as far as from the recognition from the league, as a world class defenseman, like the year you popped up to 69 points and won your, I think that was the year you won your Norris, right? Or the first Norris, yeah, 09-10. Was that kind of when it all came together?
I think so. The one year I was named to an all-star to an all-star game, and I think that might have been when I was 23 or 24. I can't really remember. I should know that. Um, and that was, I felt at that point I didn't think I'm not an all-star, like I'm not even really on the power play yet, But our team in Chicago wasn't great, but I certainly was. That was a bit of a confidence boost too. And I think you're right though. When it's not until you're on that top power play unit, and also I think having team success, it's like once you have success as a group and as a team, then you get that individual recognition a little bit more, and rightfully so, I think in a lot of ways. So the team started to perform, and we started to get more players, and you're in those important games more and more, and it just kind of grew from there.
Yeah, what a special time. And I know you've probably done a bazillion interviews about it. Just Patrick Kane and Taves and yourself and Hossa and like a bunch of you kind of almost seem like growing up together. You mean by the time you won the cup, you mean Kane was 20, you're 26, so you've been into your career for a little bit. But what was it like seeing these pieces get added and kind of knowing that you might have had something special there?
Yeah, it was fun. It was a fun time. I keep in contact obviously with lots of those guys, and um, yeah, when you're all young and like you said, 20 to 26, and I was an older guy, I felt like on the team. Most of the guys were 24, 23, and we'd all go out as a team after the game, and it felt like juniors, but we're in the NHL. And I remember just even after practice, guys would be having lunch or whatever, or sitting around and hanging out in the lounge, and it would be like 2 hours, 2.5, 3 hours after practice, and the lounge was still full. It was so guys really got along well, and we were it was a fun group to be a part of, and yeah, definitely great memories.
Did you see that change the social aspect of it? Like the players I work with now, I mean, I've been out of the game forever as a player, but like there was still a lot of community, right? There was a lot of going out for the long lunch. Like there was definitely some beers involved. Like there was that type of camaraderie. It
Yeah.
sounds like that's sort of been removed, and it makes sense in a lot of ways, just with social media and phones and everything else, right? That guys are subjected to. But yeah, during the course of your 1,200 games, did you see a shift in how guys hung out together and bonded?
Yeah, I mean, my first couple of years there, I think it was Curtis Brown was the only guy that had an iPhone. I still had a Discman and headphones, and so there was just a lot more conversations and card games. I know they still play cards and things like that, but in general, it's like after a flight, you get on the bus, it's pretty quiet. Where I remember times where we're just getting on the bus, driving to the hotel, or and it's just loud, and it's just, you don't ever get that very often anymore. It's just quiet and everybody's on their phone or checking their messages. And it's I thought that's what it was. Definitely a different time, and in a lot of ways a lot more fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I hate sounding like a dinosaur, but I really like I love the frickin' bus. Like I loved it
Yeah,
because like that's what you were doing. You were with the guys. I mean, either you read, right? That would be like the only thing you could kind of do by yourself is you would read. Some guys would do that at the front of the bus or whatever, or maybe you had like a Discman, like you said, and you'd listen to music. But other than that, you're having a conversation with somebody, or you were playing cards, or you're making fun of somebody, telling a joke, like whatever.
yeah,
And God, there's a lot of I don't know, like that's some of the best stuff of the game, I think, and I really feel that some of these teams are missing that now.
yeah. I agree. It's almost like they should implement a rule, and then they would see you get to know your teammates better, and they would everybody kind of, you see different sides to the person, right, when you're talking and conversing with them more and joking around, and
Yeah.
everybody's involved too. It's not just one or two guys. It's five or 10 guys in a whole like conversation and joking around, or different pockets of players chatting and laughing on the bus,
Yeah.
and the plane too. And it's just, yeah, it's just different now. And it is. I agree. I don't want to sound like a dinosaur either, but it's too bad that technology has kind of transformed it a bit.
Yeah. It's kind of keeping teams apart, I think. I think there's some good stuff that they could do there. Some coaches have like done a no phone policy on buses or some scenarios. I think that's an interesting thing to explore as a coach, if you get the team involved in it, right? I think if you ask the team, hey, like this could be an alternative to what you're doing right now. Maybe it's better. Are you willing to try? Instead of like forcing it down their throats, like
Right.
maybe there's some buy-in there, but yeah, anyways, I love the bus trips. I love the plane rides. I mean, I love the after practice time, being with the guys. That was some of the best stuff of the game, and being a pro, well, even being a junior, tons of fun. Take a short break from the podcast to talk about the UMH 68 and the sponsorship, title sponsorship position that is available right now for the UMH 68. Again, who is going to be the people that you touch by being a sponsor? That is the top level players in their province at their age group. So, and there's 68 of them. So we're doing this in 5 different events this year. So this is over 300 of, let's use the word, elite players in their province. They are the influencers of their age group. They are the people that other kids want to be like, want to play like, want to be on their teams with, and definitely the type of the type of player that you want your product in or around. So a huge opportunity here to get involved with the UMH 68 in its growing, expanding state. We plan to do almost double the events next year. We want to bring on a girls division, as well as offering the 2 age groups, the minor bantam and major peewee age groups in each province. So yes, the UMH 68 is going nowhere but up, and now is the time to take on a title sponsorship role. I am having conversations outside of this podcast, of course, with interested people. But if this speaks to you, if you are an owner of a company, if you are involved in a whatever, it doesn't have to be a hockey product, but if it is a hockey product, great, and want to be involved in amateur sport and support a really, really great experience in the UMH 68 Invitational that grows people as well as the player, and brings people together and for education and development purposes, then this might be something that speaks to you. And again, you can reach out to me at jason@upmyhockey.com, or you can leave a contact message on the website or on any social media channel, Jason Padolan as well, at IG, or at the UMH 68 that is also on IG. So lots of ways to reach out, but would love to collaborate with like-minded brands and corporations that want to get involved of a pretty cool expanding brand. All right, let's get back to the discussion with Duncan Keith. From a leadership standpoint, I've heard a ton of stories about Taves. I know that you were a leader in your own right too. Like, if that topic's come up on my podcast lots. I mean, leadership styles, how to do it, what means good leadership. Like, what would you say about leadership and maybe what you learned from some of the guys you played with?
Yeah, I played with so many guys that were great leaders in their own way. I talked about AJ Baines, my first captain in the minors, and to me, what always stuck with me about him was just how positive he was, no matter what. And it was just like everything was a positive.
Yeah.
And then a guy like Marty Wilford, where it was like his practice habits, and you know, he could, no matter what happened away from the rink or anything, it was always like when the game was on, when he was on the ice, and he was dialed in and he was performing, and whether it was practices or games. And so I felt like I learned a lot from my captains that I played with, and leaders before me. And for me, it was always, I think everybody's different. There's different kind of leadership styles, and Taves was certainly a great leader. We had great leaders with that group, and Seabrook and Sharp and Hossa um, and guys like Andrew Ladd. There's like the guys that got a lot of the attention, but other players that maybe didn't get as much attention, but were huge parts of our success as a group because of the way they led and the things they did. And for me, it was always just competing and trying to be a hard player to play against and be ready to go, and knowing that my teammates, I guess, wanting my teammates to think of me as a guy that they'd want on their team going into battle, that that knows it's going to show up for whether it's a shinny hockey game or a Stanley Cup final, and compete as hard as I can. And I think part of leadership too is trying to include everybody in the group, and making everybody feel a part of the team. And you know, you get especially the higher levels, where certain guys get a lot of the attention in terms of the media, and but it's a lot of times those guys that play 5 to 9 minutes a night, and those guys are the life of the dressing room, and planning parties and team dinners and doing things, and they're just as important as the guys that are scoring 40 goals.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Uh, it reminds me of a conversation I had on this podcast with Brad Larson. Probably remember that name. And he was a coach even this year with the assistant coach with the Calgary Flames. He told a story of when he was playing for Colorado, and they had that really like crazy team. That was when Colorado and Detroit were going at each other tooth and nail, tons of Hall of Famers on his team. And he was in a minimal fourth line role, right? But he said that like Sakic and those guys like Forsberg, that like they made him feel like a hugely important piece of what was going on there. Like whether it was a hit that they would talk to him about, or something, that a back check that he had, or the way he competed in practice. And he said he just learned a lot from that, like being a guy who's maybe could be overlooked in some scenarios, but he felt like those guys made him feel important and valuable, and that made him better, right? Like to your point, like that makes everyone better. And if you're going to win a championship, everyone has to be feeling really good about themselves.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the things that I admired about Quenneville as our coach is that he everybody has a role, and it's like there's times where I look back on some of the teams that we had, and that fourth line in 2014. I know we didn't win that year, but we went to the conference finals, and we had a really good team. And that fourth line that year they were playing their 10 to 12 minutes a night, but they were counted on to penalty kill and close big games out in the last few minutes of the game, when the game was on the line. And so that might have been kind of an extreme case, but like it's just it is everybody, and you need a team to win. And if everybody feels a part of the team and feels like they have a role and some sort of worth, then you're gonna be needed come playoff time if you want to
Yeah.
win, to have that depth.
Yeah. You mentioned hard to play against quite a few times, and again, you were not a big imposing defenseman, and you never had a ton of penalty minutes, but you were recognized as somebody that would go to battle. How would you there's different ways to compete, and you've
Yeah.
mentioned that word a lot, and I love that word. I think it's one of the greatest assets you can have as a hockey player. Like, how did you define that for yourself, as far as how you were competitive and hard to play against?
For me, I would just say it was using my quickness to take time and space away. So being on guys quick, in their face right away, intensity in a puck battle. Obviously not being the biggest guy out there, so to be able to just throw a guy off the puck, it's not really going to work. So it came down to being just simply raising the level of intensity in that battle and being quicker and more intense into the fight. And um, I think quickness for me is big, but you know, um, yeah, I would just look at it as simple as taking time and space away, getting into that battle quick as you can, and then trying to separate the puck and then getting out of there.
Yeah. You, I when I'm talking with, I want to hear your opinion on this. So I talk about different controllables, right? When I'm working with my athletes and what they can control, and what I think are big value pieces for players. And one is effort, like the ability to work hard, and the other one is competitive spirit. And I classify them as different things. And sometimes, players have a hard time understanding the difference. Uh, but you can work hard to get into a battle, to use like the story you just told. But then once you get to that place, like you use the word intensity, like I think that there's a different piece of the puzzle that shows up. And that's what I call in competitive spirit. What are you willing to do in that environment? And I do think that is a controllable. Like, can we elevate that, and how much can you elevate that? Because to yourself, you're saying that you probably won a lot of battles as an undersized guy just because you were more intense in that battle. Like, do you how do you feel about that differentiation? Do you see a correlation there, as far as between effort and competitive spirit?
Yeah, I do. I mean, obviously, like you said, there is levels to working hard or going in there like your life is on the line. Like it's life or death. If you can, somebody told you that you got to get this puck off of his stick. Um, and obviously I had, like I mentioned before, I had great coaching, especially with Trent, on technical ability on how to do that, um, and working on my quickness. But that, yeah, the mindset that um, that you're gonna find a way no matter what,
Right.
and find a way to do this and get it off there and get it done,
Yeah.
as opposed to just kind of whether you're riding a bike and you're just, on a stationary bike, you're just kind of going through the motions, or you think you're going hard, but there's just kind of other levels to pushing yourself. So, um, yeah, I like that term, competitive. What was it? Competitive spirit.
Competitive spirit, I say, yeah, and I mean, it means intensity. Like, I like you just saying, boiling it down to that. Like, how can you raise your intensity in those moments to give yourself the advantage to win? Because it is a battle of attrition a lot, and which is one of the reasons I love hockey in our sport. Right, is that there's
Mhm.
different ways to be successful. It's not just about the guy with the most skill is going to win. Right,
Yeah.
there's these other things that get involved in it, and tenacity and will and drive and intensity are such huge factors. And I think in an era right now where the skill is so high, that I believe that a differentiator for those players can be what I just said. Like, that's not as high, I don't think, I mean, in
Yeah.
some aspects.
The second and third and fourth efforts, and just like off of a face-off, right? It's not that first swipe where you're going to win the face-offs. A lot of times it's that second and third effort to win that face-off. And I was never a centerman, but that's something that I talk to our centerman on is staying in that little battle until you finally won that puck back. It's just sticking with it that extra 2 seconds longer to try to fight to win it back. And um, I think that people notice that, and when it sticks out now, almost, with
Yeah.
with players that have that.
I got to ask you, I just remembered. So Cristobal Huey, we have a teammate, a former teammate of ours in connection. And so
Yeah.
Cristobal, he was with you 09 and maybe your Stanley Cup year. I'm not 100% sure exactly the years, but goalie for everyone listening, and a really good goalie. I mean, had a lot of success in the NHL. I think he was an all-star the one year. He came to Germany when I was there, the year of the lockout. And to this day, I've honestly never seen a more competitive goalie. And I played with a lot of competitive goalies and a lot of good goalies. But this guy in Germany in a lockout year as an NHLer just showed up every freaking day and did not want to get scored on, right? Like, I know guys don't want to get scored on, but like, it was a battle to get a puck past him in practice. And I had the most respect for him. He was so much fun in the locker room. Anyways, what was your, was that what you remember of Cristobal in the
Yeah.
Blackhawks environment?
When you say fun, yeah, that's the first thing that I remember him about him is just such a fun teammate to be around, and yeah, he was a great teammate. I haven't seen him in a long time, and it'd be great to connect with him. I haven't talked to him in a while either, but yeah, great memories of him with him, and he was definitely a competitive guy, and I think he was a big part of the reason why it helped push us to end up doing what we did, and push our goalie Antti Niemi in net too.
Yeah. Yeah, because they kind of split duty that year. So did Niemi take over kind of in playoffs? Is that what
Yeah,
happened in that run?
yeah,
Yeah.
and for whatever reason, I think sometimes the goalie gets hot, but yeah, they definitely helped one another. And but the biggest thing for me when I remember Huey was just how I know he was competitive, but he always seemed happy and having a good time with the guys.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe speak on the competitiveness. We talk about competitive spirit of goalies, because that's one thing that I, as a player in practice, like sometimes goalies are standing there and they don't really give a crap. Sometimes, right? Even some number ones I've had goalies that have been like that. Or you have the guy that does not want to get scored on. And for me as a goal scorer, as a forward, like that really amped me up, right? And it got my level higher. And I think that there's so much value for goalies that are competitive. Can you speak to that? Do you share that philosophy with me?
Yeah, it's nice to see goalies like that. I heard stories that Dominic Hasek would, in practice, never want to be scored on, and never want to even have a puck just sitting in his net. And that's one of the things I remember about Crawford. It was just like he was, whenever we were practicing, he was always like treating it like it was game situation, and never wanted to be scored on ever. So it makes it fun. It makes the players better too because they know they're coming in, and it's a little internal competition, and
Yeah.
and then you get bragging rights after practice, or you can go into the line and give a chirp, and then it's next time you come down on the goalie, you better score, or so it makes practice fun, I think, too. It's that
Yeah.
competitiveness and everybody pushing one another, and goalies are part of that I think sometimes gets forgotten.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's so much value for well, one, the position. I've always had immense amounts of respect for the position itself. Like they're freaking playing a different game. Like it's still called hockey, but it's a completely different game that everyone else on the ice is playing.
Yeah.
So they're isolated in that sense. They're such a key component of the team, and the mental, the mental side of the game for them is second to none. So I've always respected that spot, and I really have always loved goalies that play. They definitely made me better. If you were to give any, I said we'd go for about an hour, and here we are. We're about at that hour mark. Is this thought maybe we can wind her up like 1,250 games, dude? 3 cups. How many more Olympic experiences and international experiences? Is there one thing for you that is like your crown jewel, like that you're most proud of all the things that you're able to accomplish?
Um, I don't know. I mean, when I look at some of the teams that I played on, I just look at so many great teammates and so many, relationships that were made that will be, lifetime friends. And, um, certainly the Stanley Cups and the gold medals. When I look at those championships, they're just incredible experiences, and it's hard for me to kind of pick one. I think maybe something that I'm proud of, and it's not necessarily like a championship or an individual trophy or anything like that. For me, it's just proud of the fact that as an undersized defenseman that I made it through that jungle, and um, and I felt healthy, and I could feel like if I really put in some training, I could still feel really good again. So it's just I'm proud of the fact that you know I was I didn't miss a ton of games for injury, and I was proud of the fact that I never missed very many games from injury, and the work that I put in there. So for me, that's kind of something that I look back on, and knowing that sometimes you get some bad luck or a bad break, or a puck deflects off and can catch it. No doubt that I've had my fair share of injuries, but just being able to get out of the game and feel healthy, and now be able to coach my son and enjoy life.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, well, and that's the thing, right? Like, and I can't relate to it at all. Play 10 years pro, but not 1,250 games in the NHL. Like that's you have to do something in that chronology. Like there's an evolution to your game. There's also an adaptation, I would assume, to your game, right? Like to play that long, you filled different roles at different times. You maintained value. I would think that there must be a sense of pride in being able to do that.
Yeah, for sure. That's another one where I was the ability to adapt to different situations or different roles, and continue to add different layers to your game, and continue to learn. And I think without that, it's hard to stick around as long as I did. And it was a blast. How fun it can be. Like we talked about being with the guys, and just all that downtime, whether you're on the road or at home. And I loved it, and I loved every minute of it.
I think it comes from passion. I think it comes from a love of it, right? The willingness to want to do it. As far as like a message to the listeners right now, talking about that adaptability and that willingness to get better, isn't that a mindset? Like, isn't that like a conscious choice to want to evolve and want to adapt? I think that kind of needs to be there, right, for it to happen. And I think that's a choice for players if they want to be or not.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. And for sure, knowing that not everything goes your way. You can look at some of the best players in the world, whether it's Sidney Crosby, not everything goes his way. Um, whether it's a bounce or whatever, maybe the margin is different, but there's still times where you face adversity, and it's kind of how do you react? How do you, when you get knocked down, do you get back up, and you continue to fight and fight harder, or do you, like you had mentioned before, do you get demoralized if you're, it's that mindset that you're just going to continue to keep fighting and keep finding a way, and you can't keep a good dog down.
Yeah. You know what? I mean, I'm glad you brought up Sydney, because a lot of it, like I know my boys, they don't remember when Sydney was not able to play for like a season because of his concussion,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And look how he kind of bounced back. It was like everybody thought that, there was talk like other players were the best in the world, and it was like, he just kind of put his head down, and you knew that he was gonna, I didn't, you didn't know, but obviously that's who he is, and so he kind of grit his teeth, and did what he had to do to kind of keep his career moving along in the same way where he is the best player, and then they win two cups, back to back.
Oh, it's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. Anyways, man, I really appreciate your time. awesome to have such a great hockey group here in the Okanagan Valley. We're blessed, with how many ex-pros there are and high-level pros, and now giving back to the game with through your kids and their kids. Actually, maybe we should tell the listeners that dream team that you had there for spring hockey last year. Who was on the bench with you again?
Oh, yeah, our soldier hockey team there. We had Siebes, Brent Seabrook, Cam Barker, and myself coaching. So yeah, it was fun. 3 defensemen, so I don't know. Maybe the forwards got the shaft a little bit, but we could.
Oh, I think they were just fine.
We
but
could
yeah,
teach them how to play some defense too.
Yeah. That's kind of like, for everyone listening to this, obviously there's listeners from all over the world here, but that's sort of the hockey depth that we have here on a local spring team for 10-year-olds. You may have some Stanley Cup champions and first round draft picks and Norris Trophy winners behind the bench. So it's pretty fun. We have my youngest, he has Mike Smith. He plays against in Kelowna, and Byron Ritchie is on that bench, right? Like Wade Redden is also on that bench. So how many thousands of games are on that bench here locally? So yeah, it's kind of Jared Smithson, a 700 game NHLer, coaches TJ, my youngest, right now. So there's definitely lots of NHLers around, and it's fun that everyone's giving back. So thank you for doing this again, for you giving back, because I think the conversations matter. And lots to learn from your career. So thanks, Duncan, for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jason. It was good seeing you last weekend there.
Cool.
See you on the road. Thanks.
It was a fun one, as usual. Duncan was easy to get a hold of, super humble, down to earth for a guy who, as accomplished as he is. It's one of the things that I love about our sport is that it's very rare that you are going to run into anyone who has a big head, who is hard to deal with, who is unapproachable. And if anyone would qualify with the right to be unapproachable, it is somebody with his resume, someone that's won the amount of cups that he's won, that's been on the stages he's been in, that's won the accolades that he's had, and he's nothing but that at all. Seems very humble. Seems like I don't know if you noticed throughout the interview, but how often he talked about teammates and how often he remembered teammates. And again, a lot of the names that he mentioned weren't the stars that he played with, weren't the big names. He was talking about the guys that were in the trenches with him, the AJ Baineses of the world. That majority of you listening had probably never heard of AJ Baines before. I know who AJ Baines was because I played against him. But generally, outside of the general hockey fan wouldn't know that name. And here, that is somebody that Duncan Keith gives a shout out to and remembers, and some of the other names that didn't maybe have big NHL careers that he brought up, and he kept thanking his teammates and the experience and environment of his teammates, and there is the lesson, I believe, like another lesson of that discussion with Duncan is well, one, I love the idea of the development arc of him, what he became, his mental approach to his development and his belief in what was about to happen for him and what was going to happen for him, but also the idea that it's about more than just you, right? Like he was a part of a system, a part of an environment, part of a culture in Chicago there at the time that was about winning. And it was about taking care of each other. And it was about going to war for the guy next to you. All the things, and call them cliche or not, but they are the things that resonate with me and with hockey. And the players that get it, they will go farther as individuals. They will be better as individuals. And that is something that I do believe can be taught. It's a perspective, right? You have to understand the perspective. And once you understand the perspective and that this is valuable, you can choose to celebrate teammates. You can choose to want to sacrifice for the team. You can choose to make these things a priority for you in your own DNA. And yeah, Duncan is a great example of what makes hockey great. The idea that it is about more than I. It takes 20 to win, and it really does take 20 to win. And if winning is important to you, you're going to have to make some sacrifices along the way, no matter how damn good you are. And that was recognized also in the Scott Niedermayer interview. So great lessons here the last little while. I hope you guys are able to pick up on it, and I hope it started some discussions in your own house and in your own cars. So thanks for being here again. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being a part of the Up My Hockey up my hockey world. And until next time, you know what to do. You play hard and you keep your head up.